Okay, so today I'm on the shores of Double Six Beach, and this is the third week of June, which is an exciting time because in Bali normally this signals the beginning of peak season, which is a time when a lot of people come to visit Bali, but it's also a time when we, as let's say those in the hospitality industry, finally get to make some money. So thank you to all my supporters and commenters on the last few videos. It really gives me more courage and enthusiasm and energy to do these videos when, you know, we know somebody's actually watching and observing. So I appreciate the engagement. So it's beginning to also help me develop a better vision for what I'd like this new series to be for the Jalan Jalan episodes. I think what I'll talk about are sort of the complexities of intrapersonal intelligence and knowing how you're doing business correctly in Bali. Okay, so today I thought I'm going to talk about secrets. I'm going to talk about secrets, but in a more constructive way. There are secrets to success in business, and there are secrets to success to business in Bali. And I think there's a lot of marketing being broadcast out there, but it's not secrets. It's just meant to sell a product or a service. Okay, so I'll share with one of what I think is a real secret. One of the real secrets that I've discovered in business is it's mentorship. It's knowing when you need a teacher, knowing when to be a mentee and knowing when to be a mentor. And I find it to be like an extraordinary social hack in this world, because oftentimes I have seen people who maybe it's like what I would call professional dating, right? It's sort of like maybe those moments that you could have actually found love were fleeting and they just flew right past you, but you didn't notice. You know, that could have changed your life. So I'll talk about a few cases of my mentorship experiences, and therefore where I learned the secrets to business and also to you know, Bali, doing business in Bali. Okay, so one of the most transformative moments I had as, you know, like a early career salaryman here in Bali was meeting my first mentor. My first mentor was Ron. Ron was an expat coming from Japan. He was from Connecticut Yankee in Japan, and he worked for, I think, about a decade and a half in, you know, the Japanese fairly prestigious industries. He worked at RTKL, a large architectural firm working on big government projects and major shopping malls and ports and, you know, urban design. So that was his core expertise. But later on, Ron worked at Lehman Brothers, and I know Lehman's had its ups and downs and such, but Ron introduced me to the world of high business, whereas before I had been in the world of low business. So low business is what you learn on the streets in Bali. Low business is that kind of airport hustle, beach hustle, trying to gain 100,000 rupiah out of your pockets. And high business starts in a very different way. So what did I really learn about high business from Ron? Oh, excuse me. Okay. What I learned was, I learned so many things, it's hard to summarize it in one word, but I learned probably the value of the word to invest. To invest means that instead of expecting a really fast transactional gain from every personal engagement and, let's say, reaction that you get from people, to really take the long-term view on things, to really take the long-term way of seeing how things develop slowly, gain momentum and inertia, and then, you know, develop into something meaningful. And that's a little bit lost on a lot of people. So curiously, I'll describe how my mentorship journey started with Ron. So Ron, surprisingly, I still can't forget the way I met him. I was a real estate agent And at the time there was a client, his name was Jeff. Jeff was also a very successful businessman in Bali, and he was one of my, wasn't exactly a mentor, we never really got that close, but Jeff was definitely a available voice of reason if I had any business problems to discuss. Jeff would, Canadian guy, he was the founder of Mandara Spa, which was one of the largest spas based out of Bali in the world. He, I think, was featured on cruise ships and hotels all over the world. He built out a very successful spa program. So Jeff was selling his house in Purigading, the neighborhood I'm in now, and we had a client who was going to buy the property. So Jeff had me go and inventory the house before the sale. So lo and behold, I get to the house and Jeff's friend Ron was a guest in his house. So I'm kind of surprised to see this guy, and he's kind of surprised to see me. I ask him who he is, and he tells me he's Jeff's friend. They've known each other for decades, and he's just hanging out in his house, and he invites me for a beer. Now, this is a really critical point in which a lot of people, I think, fail. A lot of people would just go, no, I don't have time for a beer, I'm doing work, or they would forgo that opportunity to connect. But I was like, yeah, sure, I'll have a beer. So I had one beer, and then a second beer, and then a third beer, and then Ron invited me for dinner. So I think I finished the inventory of the house and I decided I would stay. So I went to that dinner, and then Ron invited me to a few hundred more dinners after that. Like, we really got to know each other very, very well. So why was that moment transformative? Why was that moment a secret? And why was mentorship a hidden door? Because Ron's table in his home, Ron eventually bought that villa, so I didn't get the sale at all because Ron ended up buying it direct from Jeff. But what I got from being at that table for the next 100, it probably was more, it was probably close to 200 or 300. I went to Ron's house like almost every weekend to have dinner, sometimes during the midweek as well. But Ron always invited substantial people to sit with him at his dinner table. These people were businessmen, these were architects, these were senior leaders of industry and banking and urban planning and government. Many of these people would accept Ron's hospitality because he was sort of a beacon for a lot of people who had been coming from Japan but looking for alternative investment opportunities in Indonesia. And so at that table, what I learned over time was values. I learned the significant difference in which people with really high net worth thought. These were not middle class dinner time conversations about paid time off or membership cards at Costco or trivial things like that. These were always honest, deep, engaging conversations through multiple hours and multiple days sometimes about troubles, about problems, about solving difficult problems using, what's the right word? Creative, innovative strategies. Understanding how people work. Very few of these conversations were boring. All these conversations were very stimulating, very intellectually captivating, and I asked a lot of questions. I thought of that dinner table as my classroom, and I think Ron, I guess his benefit was he would always have somebody that would be a moderator for his guests and always be able to add to the conversation, so that part was good. But through those dinner encounters, I transformed. I transformed from somebody who was deeply set in a middle class mindset to somebody who finally could understand how wealthy people thought, how people of high net worth with hundreds of millions and billions of dollars, how they make plans and strategies. I could get past certain moments that would be financially too painful for somebody from a lower or middle income background to absolve, right? I learned how common it was, even for those with lots of power and lots of capabilities, to to make mistakes and get themselves into failure. And I learned about the practical demonstration of resilience. Nobody who was rich found their fortune overnight. Everybody had to slog through it. And it occurred to me that, and this sounds really weird, but the best way I could actually understand it was a quote from Wolf of Wall Street, where the Leonardo DiCaprio character, Jordan Belfort, said something like, "I've been a rich man, I've been a poor man, and I choose to be rich every single time." And that occurred to me. That one of the secrets in business is, do you want to choose to be rich? If you want to choose to be rich, then you make money, you lose money, you keep on doing business. If you don't want to do that, you go back and find a job, or you take on a lesser risk, more gentle, comfortable industry or profession. At some point, I guess the secret to business is your identity. As a businessman, as a person who is doing business, it needs to converge to your behaviors. And so having that mentorship and that gain of visibility to, I guess, what would be a closed door type discussion was so invaluable. Because until Ron brought me into that world, most of these occurrences would not even, they don't even, if you're working in an office, how would you know that had even happened? How would you know that the most important discussions had already happened somewhere in somebody's living room? How would you know that the most important discussions weren't even mentioned? They were just privately, like a text message from one party to the other, and like magic, it happened. So that to me was, and I hope Ron hears this one day, because I certainly owe him a great deal to building the character and the identity that I currently have from all those moments as a mentor. So that was one of the most influential mentors I've had. The other mentor I had was, of course, the great and legendary Chip Conley, who was the chief of hospitality at Airbnb. So by this time, my career had kind of, I'll tell you about a difficult moment. Here's a good segue. So I had a difficult moment breaking apart from my mentor Ron, and that was in a really strange time in my life, where all of a sudden the company that I am the founder of now, Bukit Vista, started exploding. So I think I've said this in a previous episode, but basically my wife had found out that we had a product market fit for medium-term rentals, specifically to international students in Jimbarai. It's a very niche market, but it was growing like 30% month on month. I made easily, I think in a few months, what I would have made working at Ron's in like 3 years. So the business opportunity at that point became, oh shit, there's another drone on top of my drone. Okay, all right, let's, shit. Okay, good, yeah, hopefully, yeah. How often does that happen? Whoa, how often would that happen? Another drone almost crashed into my drone. Okay, that was, I hope you guys saw that. Yeah, that was a moment of truth there. Okay, anyways, so basically my own business was doing pretty good. It actually wasn't even really my own business. It was mostly my wife's idea, and I just, helped her gain access to a few villas because I was a real estate agent. So long story short, my business started growing, and then Ron had a few managers manage me at the time, and I tried to tell them, hey, look, I want to work part-time and spend the other part of my time doing my own business, and they refused, of course, and I understand why, because inevitably if my own business grew, I probably would just withdraw. So they said no, I would either have to focus doing the Amman job or focus on Bukit Vista. So I made the very uncomfortable choice of leaving my mentor. And to be honest, I mean, in my career, generally I get fired, right? I've been fired, and I'll say that publicly. I'm my own business owner. I don't plan on going back to work for anybody else in my lifetime at this point. It's not because I'm arrogant, it's probably because I'll be unqualified to do so. So I've been fired about half the times of my previous jobs, and then leaving, surprisingly, a good leader was really, really hard. And especially a good leader like Ron, who had personally invested in my development for over almost 4 years. So I guess that was a really, and this is a good opportunity to talk about. This is a good opportunity to put this on record. When do you quit from a successful job to go and do your own thing? Well, I guess if you're making a ton more money, that's a pretty good sign. I mean, it means that you have found a way to sustain yourself economically. But at some point, and this is the point that where the mentorship picture is so important, is that I had a very powerful discussion with my managers and with Ron. I really respected the managers that Ron put together for the team at Amman. World-class people. Stuart Smith, Moens, I don't know what Moens' last name was, but these guys were industry veterans that had spent like 20 years in project management on very sophisticated, complex construction projects. So I had beautiful relationships with them. And so I went to ask them, hey, what should I do? I mean, like, you know how good friends I am with Ron and all this. Should I tell them that, you know, I'm gonna quit? And they said, you know, Jing, just tell him the truth. He's an entrepreneur. He will understand. And I thought about it and I was like, yeah, that kind of makes sense, right? How can one entrepreneur ever really condemn another person on their team who wants to be an entrepreneur? It's sort of like you either believe in what you're talking about and you believe in your identity, or you don't, right? So I had a very sad lunch with Ron. He invited me to lunch in Nusa Dua. We talked, and I think there were some tears shed on both of us. And I mean, Ron left me with some interesting words. He said, hey, look, Jing, you know, you live by the sword and you'll die by the sword, which became prophetic. Okay, that opens up another story before I get back to Chip Conley, right? Because not too long after that, okay, so after I quit and started to focus full-time on Bukit Vista, not too long after that, we went bankrupt. We made some very poor decisions due to a lack of experience in business. Decisions I hope you guys will avoid. And it was, you know, it just didn't lead to anything, and we lost a lot of money. We spent a lot of money trying to protect something that didn't work out. And basically all the money that we had made in the medium-term rental market, we blew it in 2 nights. Blew it in 2 nights on 2 stupid Halloween parties that, I mean, the good point is Halloween is now celebrated in Bali. We were one of the pioneers of celebrating Halloween, but the bad point was we lost something close to, I think, $50,000, which in Bali takes a while to get 15 years ago, right? So yeah, that wasn't so good. Was it 15 years ago? Yeah, almost 15 years ago now. Ugh. Yeah, terrible experience going bankrupt, right? Going bankrupt and not really having a backup, not having a job anymore, not having, you know, anything anymore. So that bankruptcy led me into a really dark place. It led me into, you know, at first you try to deny that it happened. You try everything you can to get back up and fight another day, but then you're realizing after a while that the longer you fight, the more trapped you get. And then you start hating Bali. You start like, why did everyone set me up for this? Why did everyone just go along with saying that I had such a great idea when they didn't plan to show up for my event, when they didn't even want to contribute? Why did I get all these fake promises, you know? And then, you know, somebody with some business experience tells you, well, you obviously failed because you forgot to do something simple. And I'll give you a hint. If you're planning an event where you're planning to spend a lot of money, make sure you sell tickets to the event before you actually produce it. because if you can't sell any tickets, you should probably not produce it with your own money and then hope that on the same day arrivals will actually, you know, compensate for the lack of confirmed reservations you have. So that was, you know, that was a rookie move done in my late 20s. And yeah, that was painful. But anyways, I forgot. We're not here to talk about my my bankruptcy experience. We're here to talk about mentorship. So, actually, it kind of segues very nicely. Now that I think about it, segues very nicely. So, basically, after dealing with bankruptcy, I decided I couldn't be an entrepreneur anymore. There was no more opportunities in Indonesia to be an entrepreneur. So I decided I was going to go back home. And this was after I had a wife and a daughter I was going to go back first home to America. I was going to go and live with my dad again actually, I was in my late 20s, early 30s at this point. So this is not like the most appropriate thing to do as a, you know, as an adult, right? So that's what I did. I had to do that. I had to go back and kind of eat some humble pie for a while and figure out how to stand up again. So basically, where everything kind of ties together is back in San Francisco, back in my hometown. So I go back and I have friends that had bought homes and had already become, you know, successful. They had already gone on many holidays to Europe, and they had like nice cars and homes. I talked about that already, right? So I started consulting and asking them, what do I do? And surprisingly, I mean, they're still middle-class people, I would say, for the most part. Very well-paid middle-class people. So they give me the advice that you would normally get. You know, you need to go read this book, you need to study this, you need to pass your qualifications for, you know, entry into Google or Facebook. Those were the companies I was hoping to work for. And all this stuff, right? So I was like, okay, you know, I'm familiar with that. I'm an engineer. I know, you know, the benefit of studying for a test and, you know, getting A's on exams. But down deep in my heart, I felt like there was something wrong with that advice. I was like thinking, that's not what high net worth individuals would do, right? So ironically enough, and maybe coincidentally enough, Ron happened to be in San Francisco. So I found out somehow, I forgot how, but I reached out and I said, hey Ron, do you want to get lunch? And I couldn't pay for lunch. I could barely pay for the ride to lunch. So we went and I met with my mentor again. And this is what I think is so valuable about these kind of relationships, right? Mentorship relationships, because Ron accepted the actual lunch invitation and he came with his new wife, which was also, you know, his process of dealing with midlife crisis, I suppose, at the time. And we had a conversation and he told me, he listened, of course, he listened to what I wanted to do. And he said, Jing, you know what? You're not going to be an engineer. You're going to be miserable being an engineer. And I denied it. I said, hey, look, you know, Ron, you didn't know me when I was before working with you. I was an engineer. I was going to go and get like a job in high tech anyways. He said, Jing, this is what you want to do. Okay, who do you want to work for? I said, I want to work for Google or Facebook. He said, great. Pick up the phone, call the CEO of Google and Facebook, and tell them why you want to work for them. I scoffed at the idea. I was like, you know who those people are? That's Sergey and Larry and Mark Zuckerberg, yeah? Says, okay, don't call them. And just wait 20 years to get into the organization or whatever it takes, right? It's the biggest shortcut you can afford yourself if you just have the courage to go talk to these people. And you know what? After you call them, no matter what, they'll remember you, they'll respect you. And then I left the lunch. Ron had to pay because I didn't really have the money to pay for the very expensive San Francisco lunch of oysters and seafood that we had. So So yeah, that was that. We left it there. But after leaving it there, I went to work. I realized I had nothing to lose. I was at the very bottom anyway, so I went, I talked, and I eventually found my next mentor, who was Chip Conley, finally, right? Chip Conley was not the CEO of Airbnb, but he was already recruited as their chief of hospitality in a hospitality company. So I figured that would be worth something, you know, that would be something that would be ultimately valuable. So I reached out, and Chip agreed to meet. Chip agreed to meet me again for breakfast, which is generally hard for me because I have to wake up a few hours early and then commute and then get to the city in San Francisco. But I met Chip, and Chip then brought me to a whole new level within the hospitality industry. Chip is somewhat of the godfather of San Francisco. His connections go all the way up to the governor of California and to a lot of the tech heroes. They all know Chip because Chip is the host of Silicon Valley. He is kind of like the person you trust to look after when you have guests coming over from all different parts of the world. So Chip took a special interest in my case, and I think he even helped me get the job ultimately I got at Airbnb. And Chip would always tell me really, really valuable advice that I needed to hear right when I needed to hear it in the efforts to actually build my character. And I'm running a little bit over almost 30 minutes here. So let me try to wrap this up and conclude. So these days, I'm a mentor now. These days, I've been invited to be mentors in many university programs, coaching, you know, high potential Indonesian students to pursue difficult fields like technology, AI, entrepreneurship. These are forefront industries that are really, really challenging to start in Indonesia because there's not that kind of really well-developed ecosystem that you have in San Francisco. So I'm with a mentee right now, in fact. He's this really dashing character, and he's got a lot of that youthful energy that I used to have in my early days, and I think it inspires me to be able to help. But hi guys. Hi. But the reason I think mentorship is kind of a secret is because I don't know how to call it, but I feel that in Indonesia, oftentimes the person sitting next to you who orders that really expensive cocktail, or, you know, you can just tell they have money, right? And not just that they have money, they have that old money look. We all know what that looks like. That's kind of like a sensible look. I mean, Indonesians inherently know what that looks like. That could be your golden ticket to jumping 50 places ahead in life. That could be your golden ticket to understanding how to get over all the career hurdles that you've ever had. If I had said no to that beer, I wouldn't have gotten those 100 conversations. I would never have met Ron, and I probably wouldn't have met Chip, and none of the things that led me to have my own business and my own ability to finally like make it here in Indonesia would have happened, right? So I think that's the secret, guys. If you are looking for a secret, then when you see somebody who looks like they've been successful, just go up and say hi. Go up and say, hey, can I offer you a drink, a cigarette? Can I just get 5 minutes of your time? Because you know what? If you ask, I think they'll respect you. All right, that's it. This is Jing again from Jalan Jalan. This is the longest episode I've ever recorded, but hopefully this story will go to inspire other people to find business success here in Bali.